Hi, shalom friends. There's a charming anecdote about the seventh Rebbe of Chabad, our holy Rebbe. And the Rebbe was very modest as well as his awesome greatness. As great as he was, that's how modest and humble he was. And there was a schoolgirl who used to meet the Rebbe in the early years of his leadership on Eastern Parkway. And I don't remember all of the details. It actually is recorded in one of the encounters of Jewish media. But if I remember correctly, it went something along this line, where the Rebbe saw this schoolgirl and asked her why she looked so perturbed. And she said she's really very, very anxious because at that time it was the height of the Cold War. And she actually is frightened of a nuclear fallout between the USSR and the USA. And she learns a lot about radiation and what it could do, destroy civilization. And she's really anxious. And then she says to the Rebbe, what I don't understand, though, is if it's such a dangerous power, why did God create it? So the Rebbe answered her in a manner that she would come up with the answer herself, and asked her innocently, does your mother allow you to play with knives? And of course the girl said, oh, of course not, it has to be supervised. And the Rebbe said, why? He said, oh, because it's very sharp and it's very dangerous. To which the Rebbe responded, if it's very sharp and dangerous, then why does your mother allow it in the kitchen? He said, but Rebbe, it will use it to cut meat and vegetables and fruits. So the Rebbe said, aha, we have something here which is very dangerous, but it can be very beneficial. It all depends on who's using it and for what purpose. Of course, the question was resolved. Nuclear energy is a plus. It is powerful, immense energy. Who's going to use it and for what purpose is up to man. If I had to imagine a human expression, a human emotion, which is similar in power to nuclear, I would say the word anger. It's like a nuclear explosion. And it is very dangerous. The rabbis talk much about the power of anger in a negative. And they quote that a prophet of God, someone who's truly refined and sensitive and receives messages from the Almighty, if he were to be in the state of anger, his prophecy would cease. Then they go even further. If a person is wise and has great understanding and wisdom, but he gets angry, his thinking is clouded, wisdom departs. And the Talmud even talks about the greatest of all of the teachers of Israel, which was Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe our teacher. And it points out in the Bible when he gets upset or angry, some of his great wisdom is concealed. And he makes a mistake in italics. I don't have to belabor the point. Any one of us that has ever gotten angry realizes in retrospect that we didn't think properly and we didn't express ourselves appropriately, and all of our actions were incorrect. So the question that I have is, if it's such a powerful and dangerous form of energy, why did God create it? And the answer is that actually anger is probably one of the most productive energies imaginable, but it is incredibly dangerous and has to be used under very controlled and in a controlled environment. For example, many of you have heard of that organization called MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. Essentially, a mother suffered the loss of her daughter from a drunk driver and decided to do something about this. Since her organization was founded, probably hundreds of thousands of people have profited directly and indirectly from this organization. Why? How was she able to do it? Just a simple person, relatively speaking, not a gazillionaire, and not a great politician, and not a person of great prominence. How did she do that? And the answer is, in her own words, she got angry. Why did my daughter have to die? She got angry. Stop for a moment and think to yourself about some of the emotions that we possess. Sometimes we get very sad. And what do we do when we're sad? The answer is we withdraw within. Some people eat, some people sleep, and some people drop out. If it stays for a long time, it becomes clinical, gets a depression. What happens when you're frustrated? Again, you have a little bit of anxiety, and it goes nowhere. What happens when you're angry? The emotion of anger is an energy that you want to express. You could express it verbally, you could express it physically, you could express it by jogging for 2 hours, but it's the opposite of serenity. Some of the other emotions, if you're hurt and wounded, you don't have any energy directed outwards. But when you're angry, that energy can be directed outwards and could literally move mountains. Does God ever get angry? Well, if you look in the Torah, you will find cases and times when God expresses anger. Now, were anger to be something completely negative, and I'll introduce the word evil, God has no negativity, and certainly we cannot at all ascribe to the Almighty God, who's the source of holiness and goodness, any evil. So how could God get angry? Well, we're forced to say that anger is not a bad or wicked or evil emotion. It's just a very powerful emotion that in human terms can overtake a person. So from being angry, you could lose lucidity and now you're mad. But of course, God, who is Kel Yachol, the possessor of all powers, never allows anger to overpower wisdom or kindness or benevolence. So anger is appropriate. Let me try to be a little bit clearer. When is anger appropriate? When an injustice is served. Now, one of the things of children, those of you that are privileged to have them or educate yourself about them, will often find children getting angry. And when you try to find out why they're angry, a lot of times they say, it's not fair. They're angry because the teacher was not fair, because the kids in school are not fair, because the parents are not fair. It's not fair. You can't punish me. I didn't do it, or I don't deserve it. And if you really think about it, the issue is not whether they're right or wrong. When you think about it, the simplicity and the contrast is amazing. Something is not right. The appropriate response is anger. Now, why do we not get as angry? Or alternatively, why do we know we should not get angry? Because we claim that there's an injustice being done, but upon reflection, we can understand that it was very subjective. And perhaps it wasn't an injustice. So we might get angry at our boss for not recognizing us, and then 2-3 days later, or perhaps 2-3 months later, realize, actually, he was justified. I didn't really do such a good job. And I could go through a long list of possibilities, but you could do that at home. Think of times when you were angry, and say to yourself you were justifiably angry because someone took your parking space, and then you say to yourself later, what made it my parking space? We both saw it at the same time. Why was it my parking space? Because my blinker was on? Maybe he didn't see it. Maybe he had an emergency, so on and so forth. You don't know for sure. So for the moment of anger, you feel justifiably angry because an injustice was done. But it was done to you. Let me ask you a question, a hypothetical question. There are volcanoes, hurricanes, tsunamis, all kinds of natural disasters. I think the insurance companies call it acts of God. So you read about a famine somewhere, a flood elsewhere. Do you get angry? Or perhaps you wonder, you're perplexed. Or perhaps you feel pity. Or maybe more correctly, you feel compassion. And you say to yourself, what can I do? Should I give some charity? And so on. But is anger one of them? Those, I don't think so. But what happens if you happen to be in that area? So now there's a flood. You spent $150,000 renovating your home, and out of nowhere, crazy rains, and it floods you. And all your hard work is essentially destroyed. Is anger not one of those things that you might feel? I'm not saying you should feel. I could say yes. Well, I have no doubt. There are people that are angry. Of course, you say at who? At God? At the city? At the sewer department? At the fire department? The civil service? The United States government? But they're angry. Now, I don't get it. A minute ago, you were not angry when it happened to someone else. Why are you angry that it happened to you? If it's the injustice a human being should not suffer, or Almighty God, we cannot accept suffering even when it comes from you, so then go out and help. Don't get angry. So for us, anger is not a bad emotion. It's just that we can't handle it. Because for us to see an injustice, to see it in its purest sense, we would have to actually go out of ourselves. And therefore, on a practical level, let me be very, very clear to anyone that's listening, anger is the type of an emotion that you should very rarely express, if at all. Why? It's a nuclear bomb. And it could be beneficial, but it is so rare, and you have to be so much on top of it, it's simply too dangerous to go there. But I will be very clear with you. Anger is a positive emotion. It can change your direction of life in a positive way when you get angry at something that you have done or have not done, or something that was done to you. If you can be pure that it was a true injustice, you could actually allow yourself to use that feeling, that even surge of anger, and to propel it in the right way. Let me give you a practical, let me end with a practical piece of advice based on many Chassidic stories. I forget the name of the Rabbi, but there are many that did this concept. There was one holy tzaddik who obviously would not get angry because it's against God to get angry. You have to accept the will of God. But there are times when an injustice happened and he got angry. So let's make believe, hypothetically, he had an acquaintance that did something terrible, did an injustice to Reuven, and the Rebbe heard about it and got angry. You know what this Rebbe would do? He would actually write down, I am angry at so-and-so for doing this injustice, And then he would wait 24 hours. The next day he would look at it and say to himself, is anger appropriate, or perhaps a different emotion? If he felt anger was appropriate, he would call over that guy and he would say, yesterday I was very angry with you. Now, he's a tzaddik, he could do that. But between me and you, it doesn't sound like you have to be a tzaddik to do that. All of us have heard of count to 10. Well, it only gives you 2-3 seconds. Others will tell you walk around the block, and that gives you fresh air, so that's good. But what's best? What's best is give yourself 24 hours. And then if you truly feel that you were supposed to have gotten angry, by all means say, something? I was very angry with you yesterday, and now let's talk about it. Now let's do something about it. Ultimately, if you really want to know what we should get angry about, we should get angry that there's still evil in this world. And therefore, we should use our energies to combat evil. We should be angry to a certain extent that people are still hungry and sick. We should marshal our resources to get rid of poverty and to heal the sick. And most of all, though I'm not sure the word is anger, we should be discomfited that we are in exile, and we should use some of that righteous indignation to plead with God, to have mercy upon us and bring the righteous Mashiach. Amen.